Blood, sweat, tears to call it. And if I can't walk, then I'm crawling. It might flicker, but they can't kill the flame. I can't scream, I can't crease in my heart, so. Well, welcome. Hello, Father.
What's up, son? Where you been?
Trying to make some money. What are you doing?
About the same thing.
Yeah.
Yep. It's been a good day. I've talked to a lot of people today. Had a workshop this morning. About 17 folks came to it. It was good. Made a lot of phone calls. So, yeah, doing a lot of work to make some money.
17 people's a lot. That's awesome.
Pretty good. Very happy with it. Yeah.
We did a workshop at a realtor's office today. So we taught them how to use the ROI calculator to get some buyers off the fence.
Oh, what kind of calculator?
The return on investment calculator.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Taught them how to show their potential sellers how much equity they have in their house and get them off the fence about selling. Because if you got a bunch of equity in the house, I don't understand why you keep your home on the market or off the market rather.
Yeah.
So did that. They all thought it was really helpful. Of course, they're all scared about the market, so had to talk some of them off the ledge a little bit, which was fun. So,
okay.
Good day. Got my past client calls done.
Sweet.
Got somebody pre-approved. Helped somebody rebuild their credit.
Nice. That's a full day.
It is a full day.
Cool.
Yes, sir.
Well, we're first episode of this we're doing. We decided to name this podcast "Sweat the Small Stuff," and I was telling CJ a while back that I remember this book that came out. I was thinking about this the other day. I think it was around 96, 97, and I don't know, probably about the early 90s is when I really got hooked on reading. I hated reading in school, but found Zig Ziglar and then got hooked on his books, some other sales books. And anyhow, this book came out. I was in a book club at the time, and this book came out called Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. You probably have heard of it. But we read this book, and as I'm reading this book, I'm thinking, this is about the dumbest book I think I've ever read in my life. Like, don't sweat the small stuff. And I don't know, it just feels like as I've gotten older and had the opportunity to be able to associate, hang around with some really very, very, very successful people in my industry, that everything is in the details. It's all small stuff. And if you don't sweat the small stuff, you're probably not going to be anything but mediocre in whatever field you are. But I think, too, it's not just about business. I think it relates to being a dad. I think it relates to your marriage. I think it relates to being, if you're a person of faith, your faith. I think it relates to every single part of life. Like, everything is made up of really paying attention to the details and the small stuff. So, we thought about this podcast for a while, and we decided to come out with it. I kind of envision being able to talk about different parts of life or business either, and maybe have some guests on from time to time that can go deeper into, what does it take to have a great marriage? I mean, how do you pay attention to your money and master it all the time and do it well? And, talk about business, all these different things. I think the devil is in the details with all of it. What are your thoughts?
Last year we did 75 hard, and in doing 75 hard, you've got so many things you have to do throughout each day, but what's the rule with it? If you missed one thing, even if it's the picture, which seems like the least important thing, but it's treated just as important as the workouts. If you miss the picture, it's just as bad as missing the workout, and you have to start over.
Right.
And I was thinking about that too, thinking about our greatness tracker that we have to do every week. Like, I see people, and I've seen them in my coaching group, they get on, and right away they're really good, but then as they progress, they start to get worse. And I think what happens is they start off with, well, I got to get to 75 talk tos. And then 1 week, they're like, well, maybe I'll just get 65 this week. Maybe I don't need to do that extra thank you card, or I don't need to see that extra person. And, I think it all kind of goes on like a meter, and you're either progressively getting better or you're progressively getting worse. And when you're on that downtrend and you start lacking the details, eventually you get to a point where you're just not doing any of it. It's like the same thing with 75 hard. Like, eventually you get to a point the second you say I'm compromising with X, Y, and Z, now all of a sudden you're not doing any of it.
Yeah, right. So when you're thinking about it, like CJ and I we're both in the mortgage industry. And if you think about like what if you're a consumer thinking, all right, I'm going to a loan officer to get a mortgage loan to buy a home, what are the expectations? Like if you think about that, CJ, if you're a consumer, what do you expect to get when you do a loan?
Well, I expect you to look after my finances. I feel like I'm presenting you in my most vulnerable state.
Okay.
Right? Like, to me, like, I look at finances and I think this is the number one contribution to divorce. It's number one contribution to depression and so many other things. And so I'm coming to you, trusting you that you're going to take care of my finances. If you think about a contract to buy a house, all of that stuff is kind of put up for grabs, right? Because it's all about the terms and it's about mitigating risk. So if you don't do your job, you could be potentially putting me and my financial future at risk if you're not careful, right?
Yeah. Well, it's cool. I mean, you go into all of that, but I just want to be honest. Like, do you think most loan officers think of that when they're talking to a client?
No.
Okay. Like, I've done this for 26 years, so I'll raise my hand as being guilty with us too at one point. But I think most, like just inside of our industry, and I think you could relate this to any industry, but inside of my industry, most loan officers feel like if they give their client a decent rate and their closing costs are within reason of what they estimated, and they close on the day they're supposed to close, that is doing a great job. I mean, yeah. Okay, that's what, the detail part, if that's all I'm doing is just doing my job, but being a very average, mediocre type loan officer. Now, if I think like what you just said, think that everything I tell a client has so much to do with their financial future. If I think like that, the way I consult them and advise them has a completely different meaning on what I'm doing, or even with not just how I consult them, but let's talk about like going in the details of like, in order for me to consult them, I have to know a little bit about money.
Yeah.
I should also practice to make sure that my own money is also in order. I mean, like if you don't want to get personal fitness from a person that's way overweight, right? So, I mean, I need to make sure that I'm doing a good job with my money, that I'm following others' advice, that I'm financially literate, and I've got a budget and I know how to use those things. But I also need to make sure, just like giving the service that I'm giving to the client, that I'm not just thinking rate and closing on time, but what am I doing to separate myself and wow that client to where they rave about me? And to me, that's going in the details of what's going on with that.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and I think to add to that, so many lenders, like when they get, and I mean, I've been guilty of this too. Like 5-6 years ago, we'd have somebody call in about wanting to get a mortgage, and what do we instantly do? We ask for social, we ask for date of birth, we just get enough information to pull their credit. What I think so many people don't do is actually get to know that person and serve that person directly as it relates to their needs.
Right.
Like I had a conversation with a client a while back, and I asked her, what's the most important thing to you about this house? And she said, well, I need to get in a good school district for my kid. And I said, cool, why is it important for you to be in that school district? She said, well, he needs a really good special needs teacher. And I said, well, why is it really important for him to have a good special needs teacher? She said, well, he's 12 years old with autism. right? So now what I just found out about her is not only do I have to take care of the finances, but the most important thing to her is I've got to take care of her 12-year-old son with autism, right?
Yeah.
And I got to make sure that both me and the real estate agent are serving that need, not just here's a house with a rate, close you on time and be done with it. Because if it's not serving her son, right, she's not going to be happy with me or the real estate agent.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, paying attention to the details in our business, if we're not doing that, like not offering just the rate, not just the closing time, not just the closing fees, we have to do this other part to be really, really good at what we do. So what if you separate mortgage banking for a little bit, or being a loan officer for a little bit? Something CJ and I both love, has nothing to do with doing loans, is football. Both love the game of football. So CJ's favorite player is Tom Brady, and he's also mine as well too. Is that accurate?
Well, yes, but let me preface anything you're about to say.
Though.
Well, let me preface anything you're about to say by saying I've been rooting for Tom Brady much longer than you have.
Okay.
He's been the quarterback of my playoff team for years.
All right, so that may be fair. So anyhow, I want to mention Tom Brady though, because what we see, what the typical football viewer sees, are the 3 hours on Sundays that he plays. What we don't see is his work ethic Monday through Saturday, and not just his work ethic, but what he puts in his body, how he trains his body, how he prepares mentally, everything, so that when he's in the spotlight, those 3 hours on Sunday means the difference. That's sweating the small stuff. Yeah, I remember reading this book. I think it was the book was Relentless. Author right now is escaping me, but the book Relentless. The guy was the personal trainer of Kobe Bryant, but he talks about meeting Kobe for the first time, and they talked about a time to meet in the day, which was like, I don't know, 5:30 in the morning. Really super early. So he thought, I'm going to do my due diligence, and I'm going to get there way before Kobe does to impress him. So he got there at like 4. And when he got there, the lights were already on in the gym, and he walks in, and Kobe is already taking free throw shots. He's already been there. That's the difference between greatness and mediocrity. Kobe will forever be remembered as being one of the best. I think basketball, I always think Michael Jordan is probably the best, but those that separate in athletics like Michael, Kobe, LeBron, Tom Brady, whoever else you want to throw in the mix.
Tiger Woods. Yeah.
Who?
Tiger Woods.
Tiger Woods, yes, absolutely. There's things that they do every single day to prepare, and they sweat the small stuff. Jim Carrey, I remember reading this about Jim Carrey a while back. Now, he's probably not one of my favorite actors, but at the same time, I remember reading that when he prepares to be in a movie, he memorizes all of his lines to the point, like he's read the script so many times that when it comes to actually, doing the movie shots, that he's done it so much, he is that character, because it's not just about remembering the lines anymore. He knows the lines so well that he can be that character when the camera is rolling. That's sweating the small stuff, So we've gone from mortgages to football, but let's say just being a husband. What are some things, this topic I'm talking on now, I've been a husband for 33 years, but I'll tell Trish all the time, I'm sorry, I'm really confused. I got really confused about this, and now I'm back on track. So I'm still learning, but what are some of the details about being a good spouse you think that we can pay attention to? Just touch on it. What are some things you think?
I think you have to know your spouse's love language.
Okay.
I think it's a big one. I think you have to know how your spouse functions. Like, I mean, I know, for instance, Nicole, not great in the mornings. Like, that is not when her brain's ticking. That's not when she's her most energetic self. That's not great for her. So, like, for me, to serve her really well is making sure the coffee pot is set up and it's brewed by the time she wakes up. That way she doesn't have something else to think about, and the one source of energy she has for the mornings is already there for her. So I think it's just kind of knowing those little things. I think too, like, when I went to, like, I remember going to propose and I took mom out to go pick a ring, right? Mom wanted me to get like the blingiest, shiniest thing. And I said, well, like, that's not Nicole. Like, Nicole's going to want something simple and unique that isn't there to impress. I think just knowing those typical things rather than just thinking, well, I'm getting, my girlfriend an engagement ring, right? That's just, I spent a bunch of money on. It's got a bunch of diamonds, but it's not really specific to her.
Yeah. I mean, the point is, I think you can look at, like I said earlier, marriage, your faith, football, basketball, golf, mortgage loans. You can apply it to real estate. You can apply it to whatever it is.
Yeah.
If you want to be different, if you want to be above average, you really have to pay attention to the little details.
Well, and going back to faith, by the way, that's a great one. I mean, how many people go to church every Sunday, think they have a good relationship, but don't actually intentionally take 10 or 15 minutes out of their day to read and pray?
Yeah, right.
I mean, but they think it's okay because they're in church on Sunday.
Well, it'd be like maybe, I don't know, living in Florida, coming home on Sunday, saying hello to Trish, my wife, and then going back to Florida. I mean, that's not a relationship.
No, it's not. Yeah.
I mean, no phone calls in between, nothing like that. Just, hanging out for a couple hours on Sunday, and then I'm going back to Florida. Well, that's not a relationship. I mean, it's the little things. Knowing the love language with a spouse is huge, but like with faith, I mean, you have to be intentional. It's got to require some intention and some habits built in to make that happen. I mean, that's one. Like, I find myself oftentimes, spending time, like, faith is important to me, and I'll spend time reading scripture in the morning, but then oftentimes I lack prayer. That's something I need to work on, and I need to build more into my life, is praying and asking God and trusting when I do those things.
Well, I think it all circles back to that word you mentioned, like, being intentional. Like, I think everybody says, I want a perfect marriage. I want a bunch of wealth. I want a big house. I want good faith. Like, they all want these things. But then if you look at the daily activities they have, does it ever really change? And you're all right, like, granted, like, you're never going to be perfect, but I think it's always about what's one little thing I can do to improve today that makes me a better husband, better mortgage loan officer, better whatever than I was yesterday. Like, I don't remember where I picked this up from. I think it was your old coach Hunter, I think, taught me to do this. Somebody did. But on my way home from work, call my wife and say, hey, I'm on my way home. Do you need me to stop at the store? And it like 90% of the time, she's like, no, we're good. But there's been like a couple of times where it's been like, oh, I'm glad you called. Actually, I'm short on this and I'm making dinner right now. And yeah, if you could pick that up, that'd be great. And it's just like, I think one little thing to let her know, hey, I'm on my way home, but you got to know I'm paying attention to you. And when I get home, I'm not going to just be dead and garbage for the rest of the night. Like, I just switched from work mode to now I'm on you mode, And like Rick told me, I think this was when I went and did, when I went down there and played poker with him one night. I was asking him, how do you balance it all? And he said, how many hours a day am I a salesman? And I said, 40. He said, wrong. He said, from the time I get up to the time I go to sleep, the difference is when I'm at home, I just change who I'm selling to. Now I'm selling to my wife, right? And so I think, his mode is the energy that you put into work, I think a lot of us, even people in the core, we put all this energy into work, but we don't put the same amount of energy into our spouse, ourselves, our faith, pick any area in the seven will, the wheel of life, and we don't do the same thing. And why not?
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, we'll kind of draw this back to a close, I guess. And I don't know like I said earlier, what I sort of envision for this is diving into the different areas of life. CJ just mentioned that, and we follow a forum that it goes over this. It's a circle called a Will of Life forum, and it talks about the 7 areas, and what the 7 areas are: spiritual, love life, family, money, work, friends, self. I think I covered all of it.
Yeah.
So that's what it goes through. And what I kind of envision with this podcast is breaking down all these different areas and revisiting them from time to time as well too, and having guests on that maybe for love life, maybe sometimes we have a guest on with a couple that's been married for 50, 60 years. Like, what did they do to endure and make that successful? Or maybe we have someone on in business that's got a great business that we admire, and but just figuring out what are they doing, what are the details that they're doing to create success in that area. And that's kind of what I envision for this. And one thing CJ said a second ago too is finding 1% each day, or maybe just make it a week, but find 1% that you can improve in these areas. And when you're improving 1%, whether it's a day or a week or a month, it doesn't really matter. But the law of compound interest applies to that as much as it does your mutual fund or your retirement account. Things start growing and you start improving in that area. And that's, I think that's what this journey is that we're on. We're never going to reach perfection ever, because our name is not Jesus. But at the same time, can we grow? Can I always be a better husband? I love doing this Will of Life each November he had mentioned, CJ, you mentioned our mentor, one of our mentors, Rick Ruby. I love doing this Will of Life forum with him every November, because here's a guy that has millions in assets. I mean, when we say millions, we're not talking like 1 or 2. We're talking like
80 million.
80 plus. He's very wealthy. And you can ask him how he's doing in money, and he'll give himself a 6. Like, I know I can do better. Like, you look at all these different things, like you would think a guy that's got this might rate himself a 9 or a 10, but there's so many ways that we can improve in whatever areas. I mean, even if I've been married 33 years. Can I be a better husband? Absolutely. Like, I'm 100% positive that I can. But that's what we want to do is I want us to grow. I hope that those that will find this podcast and listen to it will also be able to grow from some things that we talk about, from some things that we might have guests talk about. But as we go into each area, I just love the opportunity to go into each area a little bit deeper, even if we find one detail or one little thing, one little nugget when we do a podcast that we can, hey, that's something we need to hone in on and work on. Then I think it's worth the time spent to do this,
Well, and I think, just one other thing to throw out there for whoever's put up with us for nearly 25 minutes. Yeah. But, as we're doing this, I think it's really cool. Like in our coaching group, for instance, we get to meet with, I think we get 6 coaching calls with any coach we want. Maybe it's 4 or whatever. But, what we do is we'll send our concierge, we'll say, hey, here's my struggle in life. Can you connect me with a coach who's an expert in this?
Yeah.
So I think, like, if there's anybody who wants us to talk about like a specific topic, or you have a struggle, like, let us know what that is. Like, we are connected to, I think, a group of people that perform at a really, really high level. And if we don't know one, we will find one that we can say, hey, this is like a guy we think is the top of the line when it comes to spiritual, or the top of the line when it comes to self, or the top of the line when it comes to marriage. So, like, if there's anything people like want to talk about, let us know and we'll bring on a guest that we think is the best at that or at a very high level.
Yeah. You know, what's cool about that is too, we have been blessed to meet a lot of folks that are very successful. They all have one thing in common. You know what that is, CJ? If you were to guess,
They're broken.
that's a bingo. Every single one of them have been in a broken place. In fact, they still consider themselves to be broken. Rick, who has got the millions, he considers himself to be broken in money. Like one of the areas I know he has worked on over the last few years is giving, you know, not being greedy. And it's been cool to watch him improve in that area. And now he gives literally millions away each year as well too. So I love that we know people that are successful, but they all came from a place of brokenness.
Yep.
And I think that's the thing to keep in mind is that no one reaches major success in any area overnight. A lot of where we're at comes from a place of being broken, being humbled, and then at some point being at a place where you surrender to another authority and you basically do as you're told and you learn. So that's what I see from here is how can we learn from those that do it better than we do and keep improving and figure out the details. So, you know, it's all about sweating the small stuff. All the small stuff, sweating the small stuff is what's going to make the big stuff really, really amazing.
Yeah.
Yep.
You're 100%.
Cool. Well, we're 27 minutes in. Is that good?
I think that's good. Yeah.
All right. Cool. Well, thank you. If you listened to it all the way through, thank you. I appreciate you being here. And like CJ, let us know some things that you'd like for us to talk about.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. That's it.
All
Great
right.
opening, great ending.
Cool.